New York. Mr. Torres for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must admit I continue to have a lack of clarity about cyber jurisdiction. I know you've been asked this question a few times, but the National Security Council exists to play a coordinating role on matters of national security, which increasingly includes cybersecurity. What is the central difference between the coordinating role of the National Cyber Director and the coordinating role of the National Security Advisor for cybersecurity? Earlier, in response to Congressmember Clark, you said the two roles are complementary, but I'm interested in knowing what makes them distinct, not complementary.
At the end of the day, if there's an event that requires the application of instruments of power outside of cyberspace, the various instruments kind of in the hands of government like intelligence or military or diplomacy, that's the traditional and sustained role of the National Security Council. My job is to ensure that the resources inside of cyberspace are prepared, complementary, and effected for the purpose intended, such that Chief Information Security Officers, CISA, Sector Risk Management Agencies, all of whom operate inside cyberspace, that they do the job that is required.
And I want to revisit a point that Congressmember LaTourneau made. So there are 16 critical infrastructure sectors, and each sector has a sector risk management agency, and the role of CISA is to partner with those sector risk management agencies to secure critical infrastructure. Even though the TSA is the sector risk management agency for pipelines, the federal government designated the Department of Energy as the lead agency on response to the Colonial incident. Do you worry, as I do, that the designation of the Department of Energy as the lead agency perpetuates confusion about who exactly is in charge, about cyber jurisdiction?
Congressman, I think it's an excellent question. Neither Director Easterly or I are here at the time and therefore unable to illuminate that choice. I would say that from this day forward, from the moment we got here, we strongly believe that the playbook should be followed, that when we allocate roles and responsibilities to the question asked earlier, policy matters, it must be effected as intended, and therefore in the future we intend to exercise, allocate, and essentially respond according to those policies and laws.
And to be clear, who in the administration decides which agency takes the lead on a cyber incident response?
I think that we define that ahead of the time, such that that agency knows at the moment that that occurs that that's in fact what they should do. Again, within cyberspace, my responsibility is to ensure that those agencies understand those roles, they're prepared, and that they then execute those roles. As the on-the-field quarterback, Jen Easterly would then ensure that that is actually being effected.
Director Easterly, I appreciated your allusion earlier to Cobra Kai.
Thank you.
I'm a fan of the show. You said earlier there's a limit to what we can do in government, that there's no substitute for cyber hygiene from the private sector, and I agree with your assessment. It seems to me the breach of both Colonial Pipeline and JBS demonstrates that the laissez-faire approach to cybersecurity that the federal government has long taken has been a profound failure. A voluntary framework will only take you so far. There is no substitute for mandates. So I have a few questions. Should every owner and operator of critical infrastructure report major cyber incidents to the federal government? Yes or no?
Yes.
Should every owner and operator of critical infrastructure have a Chief Information Security Officer?
Yes.
Should every said owner and operator have multi-factor authentication?
Yes.
Should every owner and operator have password updates and software updates and third-party assessments?
Yes.
So if you agree that every owner and operator of critical infrastructure should adopt these cross-sector standards of cyber hygiene, as you described them, then when is the administration going to mandate them universally?
Well, we've begun a lot of that work with mandating it within the federal government, and that is the work that we are doing with the EO. All of those things are part of ongoing efforts, and that is signaling to our private sector partners who own that infrastructure. And, as you know, it's not owned by the federal government, but we are doing everything we can to ensure that we're signaling by leading by example and then by articulating the goals and standards that private infrastructure needs to implement to make themselves safe.
With respect, signaling is different from mandating. Like, the only reason we have mandates for pipeline cybersecurity is Colonial Pipeline. And there's a sense in which I feel like we are reacting to events rather than governing. And I want to govern proactively.
Yeah,
So,
I think there is, I agree with you, bottom line. I think there is a role for ensuring that we are holding those who own and operate critical infrastructure accountable for ensuring that their systems and networks are secure and resilient. And I think you're starting to see some of that being implemented here by the government.
And I want to quickly squeeze in a question. I'm curious, Director Inglis, what is your opinion on General Nakasoni's cyber strategy of defense forward, and what impact, if any, has SolarWinds had on your opinion on that strategy?
I think the strategy, which has now been in place for 3.5 years, is an appropriate strategy. It follows on the heels of what we've done in other domains of interest. NATO is defend forward. The prepositioning of U.S. forces in South Korea is defend forward. It should be followed by the application of all instruments of power in a similar fashion, such that we have an early discernment of threats against us, an early action to engage those threats, such that we no longer wait on shore to receive those threats as they arrive in a distributed fashion.
Thank you very much. You see why he's vice chair of the committee, right?